Hello, and welcome to the Driven to Succeed Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Brett LaCoy, and I have our returning guest, still very special, Zach Robb.
Good to be here again.
Yeah, I mean, we actually full disclosure, we actually just got done with an episode about half hour before this, and we're like, man, that was so good. Let's do another
Keep it
one.
going. There's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. And what we wanted to kind of pick for this topic is, so you want to be a landlord. What are all the things that come along with being a landlord? How do you start? What do you do once you're established? What's going on in the landlord space? So that's the topics that we're going to be covering today. But let's kind of start out. Where do you get your start?
Yeah. So I think I've mentioned it before, and a lot of people share the same story here. I think it's becoming even more and more popular now, in kind of an adverse market, or what people would consider to be having some adversities, is house hacking. Getting a multifamily property, being able to get in with a lower down payment as an owner occupant. So a duplex, for example, is how I started out in 2018. I think it was 23 at that time, 22. Found an opportunity to purchase a duplex in North Minneapolis. It was turnkey, fully renovated, already had tenants in the basement. So right away, I can move in and have income immediately, and have most of that income at least cover a good chunk of the mortgage. So now you're paying, instead of $1,600 mortgage payment, maybe it's $600 or $500 a month net based on the rent that you have coming in. So that, as you can just hear in those numbers, makes things a lot more feasible for someone, rather than stomaching that huge, intimidating mortgage payment on your own, without having any income coming from that property.
Right. So using FHA, that's the one that we know about. We know and we love it. 3.5% down. This year they actually made it even easier. It's still 3.5% down, but they actually slashed the insurance that comes with FHA almost in half.
Okay.
So you used to go from, if depending on what your credit score was.
This is the PMI that we're talking about.
This is the PMI that we're talking about that comes along with an FHA loan. It's actually set. Whereas opposed with like conventional, it's gonna matter on a multitude of factors.
Sure.
Credit score being a big one. A lot of times what we were actually seeing was that, well, it's actually cheaper 5% down using Freddie Mac's Home Possible and using that PMI. But now with FHA cutting their insurance in almost half,
yeah, that's
FHA, it's made it even more affordable for folks to house hack.
Right. And for those of you that don't know, that PMI, private mortgage insurance, right? It's an extra cost that you're going to pay when you're in a position of less than having 20% equity in the home, or an 80 to 20 loan to value ratio.
And that's for conventional. With FHA, you're going to have it regardless, unless you put down at least, and I want to say it's 10%. After 11 years, it'll fall off.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's good to distinguish.
Yes, it's good to distinguish, but we can talk about that too. Most times you're going to be refinancing by then, and hopefully you're going to be able to refinance into that conventional loan, and you're going to have really good terms on it.
Right.
Something else that recently has come out and is going to be going into effect here the 18th of November. News. Yeah, it's really big news. So Freddie Mac Home Possible, you could go and you could buy a multifamily with 5% down. That's a really good deal, right? Multifamily, because otherwise it usually costs you at least 15% down. And if you wanted to go even higher than that, 3-4 units, now you're looking at anywhere from 15 to 25. Right? Owner occupied, not just as an investment property, but as an owner occupied property. The issue that we were running into, or at least that I was seeing with some clients, was they did not fit within the Freddie Mac Home Possible income limits. So you didn't fit into that. What Fannie is doing is they're saying we can do 5% down now on 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And it is not just to their home ready loan program. This means it can be a regular Fannie product with no income restrictions. So if you're somebody who has been motivated, let's say you have a really good W-2 job, it sets you outside of that area median income, but you've always wanted a house hack, Now you can do it with 5% down. You don't need to grind for that 25% down payment anymore.
Yeah. It's a
So
big difference.
it's a huge difference, right?
Mhm.
The difference between 5 and 25, if you're going for a fourplex, that's huge.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Even $100,000 a door, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 to 25% and is a pretty substantial difference there. So it makes it possible for a lot of people who it was not even an option before. I mean, they're
Right.
talking about two completely different economic classes here.
Oh.
People who can afford to put 150,000 down on a property, or people that can
Mhm.
afford to do 20 to 30.
Right.
Right.
And I think they're doing it right. I think they're doing it right because it's still owner occupied. You can't just go and be like, I want to buy a fourplex and put 5% down as
Right.
an investor,
Right.
right? Because it still is too risky.
Of course.
It's too risky to lend against.
Mhm.
But if you live there and that's your primary house,
Mhm.
I love it. I think it's great. I think it's
Yeah.
opening up doors that we need opened right now.
And if this is your first time, this kind of bridges into the topic we wanted to talk about. If
Mhm.
it's your first time being a landlord, I don't even know if I like that term, but we all know what it means. If it's your first
Yes.
time being in this position, physically being present at the property, to understand the true condition of this property and the occupants that are within it, it really gives you it's good because it gives you a lot more attachment and understanding for what's going on in your property. Whereas it gets a lot easier to disconnect from the realities of what families in the other units might be living in, their standards of living or the condition of their units or things like that. If you're not there, it's a lot easier to disconnect from that and maybe not manage and maintain these properties in what could be considered as an ethical manner. So,
Sure. Well, let's talk about that.
mhm.
Um, when it means what does it really mean to become a landlord?
Yeah.
What does that mean? We're talking about some other things. I want to wrap that all together. What does it mean to be a landlord?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, a lot of people think that it's, it's just a vehicle for income, right?
Right.
Being a landlord means that you're getting rent checks from other people, but really, it's to me, I try to take a much more personal, meaningful approach to a lot of these things, which the reality is that you are now in charge of caring in a certain way for the well-being of several other families, potentially,
Hmm.
several other people's children, whether it's just individuals or families. I mean, you now have this new responsibility, which I believe is discounted quite a bit, as just being a rent check to a lot of people, when it
Yes.
should be treated as taking, being responsible for someone's well-being, or
Right.
family's well-being. So that's a big step. And I think we kind of talked on the last episode a little bit about, it's trying to push back against some of these adverse economic factors. And one of the big things that we're seeing that also is becoming really popular on social media is these concepts like house hacking. It's been around forever, but more
Right.
more than ever now, it's like, okay, how can you enter into the real estate market? Well, if I have half to all of my mortgage payment covered by renters, all of a sudden it's a little bit more feasible. And you
Hmm.
get kind of this, I think, like we talked about previously, a little bit of a bro culture that comes with these very brief posts on TikTok or Instagram or things like that, they kind of put forward this, maximize income and minimize expenses. Like, this is an asset, move, grow, move as fast as you can, to accomplish more and acquire more real estate. And of course, this is a principle that we support in a lot of ways. This is the American dream. But the reality is, not everybody's the same. And I would say most people are not truly prepared to take on
No.
the true responsibility of being landlords, especially not for multiple families, let alone one. I
One.
mean, a lot of people can't even take care of their own family. You know what I mean? So we naturally get people that put themselves in these positions, not for the wrong reasons, but not with the whole picture in mind, right? They're
Right.
thinking about, how can I advance my personal wealth? What can I do to maximize that? Oftentimes at the expense of the people that live within this dwelling that you own.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's and it's a very unique relationship that I think a tenant and a landlord will have,
Hmm.
especially
Hmm.
when you're smaller scale.
Yeah.
You know, I have a condo with my wife,
Hmm.
and we've had a couple different tenants in there now. We've had really good luck
Yeah.
with our
That's
tenants.
great.
And one of the things that we talk about, you know, in our initial meeting, you know, is like, look, we're here to work with you.
Right.
Let me know what's going on. You know, I personally don't understand, especially for a smaller landlord.
Mm.
You have somebody in on a year-long lease and they say, I lost my job,
Yeah.
right? And you come in and you're like, well, you owe me for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
you know what I say, and I'm not just saying, give them 100% full break, but what I would say is like, hey, help me find somebody to come and take over your lease.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of different ways that you
There's
can work with someone,
Yes,
at least.
work with them.
And I just to this point, I was just doing a little research and or not research, just kind of getting some ideas from people on the Bigger Pockets forums and looking through it, and some situations of like, should I give a gift to my tenants? Should I like what? How flexible should I be? And frankly, the comments disgusted me. It's clear that the main narrative that we see right now is like business is business, and
Right.
there's not room for leniency, and we see this constantly with big management companies, even associations, right? Name one person. My brother Ahmed was just talking to me about this. He kind of inspired this topic to come up. Exactly.
Sure.
Name one person that, one tenant that loves their management company. I
Oh,
have a
right.
management company that owns 100 plus doors. Name one person, or even their building association at their condo. It's like, I don't know many situations where that exists. And of course, it goes back to what we started this on. You become disconnected.
You
How
do.
could you possibly be involved in an ethical way when you own 100 different units that are being rented out by a third party, which you've intentionally done to separate yourself from the tenants, right? You're like, I have 100 doors. There's no way I can manage that. So I'm going to create a total barrier so that all I'm seeing is the numbers in the bank account.
Right.
And if that's going sideways, then who do you come down on? The property manager. Then what do? Treat the tenants unfairly, or maybe not even unfairly, but unethically,
Yeah.
not with compassion, which is something that we all have to just keep in mind as being paramount as a society. It
Mhm.
goes far beyond how can you maximize your profit.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, well, it's sickening. I'm not as much on Bigger Pockets, but I'm on the Burr group in Facebook.
sure, which is a very popular concept now.
Is super popular, and a lot of people come in and they say, "Oh, I'm having issues with these tenants." You know what I love? I love that one of the first responses generally is going to be cash for keys.
Hmm. Yeah,
Give them some cash so they can get out and you can rent your place out again.
right, right.
It's not take them to court, take them for everything they own, because that's just honestly, it's a headache, and you're
It's
probably
cold
not getting
blooded
anything.
too.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to say that we need to compromise all of our business
no,
standards or practices to be accommodating to people who are in adverse situations, but like there has to be a line somewhere. But at the end of the day, if you treat people like human beings and treat people like your brothers and sisters of this country, of this world, which is what I believe they are, you're going
mhm.
to get a much better outcome regardless.
Absolutely. And I kind of want to swing back actually to one of the things you said that disgusted you on the Bigger Pockets forums. You were saying, like, give somebody a gift.
Hmm.
I've heard people say, give them like, hey, December, it's Christmas. That month is free.
Hmm.
Like, where do you personally think you should draw the line on giving back to your tenants, especially if they've been good tenants?
Yeah, yeah, especially if they've been good tenants. I mean, that's a great question, but I mean, how do you treat your neighbors? How do you treat other significant people in your life, which these people are significant.
They are
Living in your
significant.
home and they're paying the mortgage for that home. So like there's it's not just someone you ran into on the street type level of relationship that we're talking about. But the reason that I actually was in those forums is because I remembered hearing on a previous Bigger Pockets podcast. I don't really listen to it that much anymore, but I remember this statistic. Some guy was talking about the power of giving your tenants a very small, like kind of impersonal, right, a gift when they move in, right? So
Sure.
like a $50 gift card, something like that, something small. And he gave some kind of statistic on how that impacted like um, the the security deposits at the end of the rent, like the tenants who were given a gift had a much better relationship. Even the small gesture, even if nothing else was done, the small
Right.
gesture right when you move in, it's the first impression, right? It's just like when you meet someone
Absolutely.
and they do something really nice for you, it kind of changes your opinion on who that person is.
Absolutely.
This is the same thing with tenants because 99% of them have never gotten a move in gift, right? They just don't expect that. They anticipate this relationship that we just mentioned, right? I hate this management company. I want to talk to my landlord as little as possible. And I'm just going to go with the assumption that they're going to treat me unfairly because that is how every other housing situation I've been a part of has gone.
Right.
Right. So for me personally, with my tenants, I give them a gift when they move in, and it's something small. Like I think the last tenants I had that moved into a duplex unit, I gave them like an orchid and a Home Depot gift card, and it was just like,
Sure.
hey, I'm happy. And also, these people are my neighbors, so it's like that's another factor too. I want you to feel good about who you're next to and not have any kind of like passive aggressive grudge against me.
Right.
But just doing something small like that just kind of shows them that I'm invested and I care, and this is not just another paycheck for
You're not
me.
just another business investment,
Yeah,
even though you kind of are, but you want your tenants to succeed.
for sure. Yeah, it's a different type of investment. And I remember my first duplex that I talked about, I've had those tenants have been in both of those units for like 3 years each now. And they've both been great. They've always paid on time. Even when they didn't pay on time, it wasn't too bad. And I was like more than happy to be, oh, you're waiting for your check to come. You clearly live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
What could me badgering you for a week? When am I going to get my rent money when I know that you don't have it, but it's coming? I'd rather just be patient and these tenants, in that example, I mean, they are so gracious because of that. They always feel bad, but I'm like, don't worry about it. Like it happens. Life happens. You're a young family. They've got a little girl. You know what I mean? Like I care about that a whole lot more than me receiving a check 15 days late. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well, and it's one of those things too, I feel like you should be able to get creative.
Yeah. Take someone's situation. I mean, these tenants that I was just talking about, actually, I remember they were so cool. When they moved in, they're very welcoming. They're always like, let me invite you in. And
Mhm.
like, we're making dinner. Do you want to have some dinner? And sometimes I'd stay and have dinner with them. But for the first like 3, 4 months, I had noticed as I'd walk in, there was no furniture. There was no furniture in the living room. They had their bedroom set up with some beds, and I think they had like one chair, like an armchair in the living room, and that was it. And I had just replaced all the furniture in my living room. I got like a new sectional, and so I just had this furniture sitting in my porch that I was going to sell. And I was like, oh wait, I know somebody who really needs this right now. Like
Mhm.
imagine living in a house, which this is still, I mean, people are in much worse condition than this in a lot of parts of the world. But like you have your daughter, you're trying to provide for them. You have your wife and your daughter, and you don't have any furniture in the house. So it's like I just brought that furniture to them. Like, do you want this? They still use that furniture to this day, 3 years later, and it
Fantastic.
is completely. I mean, it's no longer this landlord tenant relationship. It's like, okay, this is somebody who has my back and actually cares about me, and
Mhm.
because of that, I really want to make sure I'm paying on time. I really want to honor our agreement because it's important to me, because this other person has done more, the landlord in this case has done more than what 90% of landlords would do. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but this was
Right.
a simple gesture that cost me nothing other than driving over there and moving the furniture in. It makes a big difference.
So I'm hearing, these are the things that you can do,
Hmm.
and you can have really good tenants, like, but I'm going to talk about another friend of mine
Sure.
and her tenant situation, what
Hmm.
happened. Fantastic family, and everything was good. Everything was fantastic, and then 3 months into the lease, things flipped.
Mm.
The thought is that they got hooked on drugs.
Mm. It's a tough one.
It's a really tough one because now she wasn't getting paid.
Hmm.
She had the mortgage that she had to pay,
Hmm.
and all said and done, there was about $40,000 worth of damage
Yeesh.
that was done to the place.
Hmm.
How do you how do you make it so that you can have this great relationship, but you have to also be on guard for when things like that arise?
For sure. I mean, I think that when you, again, make this big decision to become a landlord, which we've talked about is a bigger decision than most people uh, seem to believe that it is,
Mhm.
you have to prepare for some of these circumstances and also understand that you can do all the screening that you want. But others, the only way to prepare for this is to assume that at some point things could flip out of your control. And
Absolutely.
you're not their counselor. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to be so involved in their life or try and get things back on the rails. Like you can I'm thinking of it from a neighbor's perspective. If I see my neighbor is struggling and there's something that I can do about it, great. If my neighbor is in a downward spiral out of control and all of a sudden, me, my property, my family is in danger, okay, there's different steps that have to be taken. I
Right.
think there is a due process, and uh, at a certain point, someone needs to be you have to go through this eviction process, maybe in this case, because
They
it's your only option and you're kind of playing damage control. But I mean, you can put your best effort in. You're never, again, these are people. It's not just like a paycheck, right?
No,
People have very
no.
complex issues that when we don't know their lives, we get a small glimpse of their life through a background check, you know, or a credit
Right.
check, which is essentially meaningless in the true context of their
Oh
history.
my. Yes.
So planning for that and still, you know, doing your best to remain amicable, having a conversation with them. You know, you don't have to prod into their life, but be like, hey, you know, something's not right here. You know, you're not paying your rent on time. I've noticed X, Y, and Z about my property.
Hmm.
You know, is there somewhere else you can go? Like what solutions can we work out here? You know, of course, try a couple things before you have to take the ultimate ruling
Right.
of an eviction. I mean, that's not a path that anybody wants to go down, but of course sometimes it's necessary. I mean, we have to also respect that, of course, like the tenants' lives are important too, but having someone who maybe has one duplex and maybe they rent or own a single family house other than that, this duplex, there's no guarantee just because they're a landlord that might be netting $500 to $700 a month. You know, that's
Mhm.
pretty standard, I would say. There's no guarantee that that means that they can lose this income from the duplex all of a
Oh
sudden
goodness,
and
no.
be fine and then make repairs to their property. I mean, this is enough. This type of situation is enough to put a landlord underwater, have to sell the house at a loss or get foreclosed on. I mean, these things do happen. So different scales, right? There's some people
Right.
that have a few property. There's some people that this doesn't matter at all because I have 200 doors. And so if you're not paying, I'm not even going to have a conversation with you. We're just going to go through the eviction
So
process.
how do you bridge that? Let's say you do have 200 doors and you want to give everybody this personalized attention.
Hmm.
How do you do that? What's the solution for these companies that are like, oh nope, you're 3 days late
Sure.
on rent, you're gone.
Yeah, yeah. So what I will open by saying here is that I don't think many people are suited to, I don't know if anybody's suited to manage 100 to 200 doors in a truly what I would consider an ethical way. And if you are to do that, of course, you have to delegate these responsibilities to a management company or a maintenance company or something like that. If you're not able to personally touch on every single tenant you have and have a conversation with them, like I am with my neighbors
Mhm.
or my other, you know, the other duplex tenants that I have, there's still things that you can do. I mean, think of what people notice when they're in their apartment building, right? Do they
Mhm.
notice that, for this example, let's say it's a 100-unit apartment building, is there trash all over the hallways? Is this place outdated and dirty? Is there water stains on the floor? Are the plants all dead outside? You know, are there people lingering that shouldn't be there in or around the building? Things like that. Taking control of, again, these are like basic concepts that a family would expect or need to feel secure, right? Is it safe? Is it clean? These basic things, you can still have control over those items. And of course, it's going to cost more money. But what people, I think, forget a lot of times is the more money that you are spending on these types of items that are little things or maybe big things that
Sure.
make an occupant feel like, oh man, I don't know this person, but they clearly care about this building, which
Right.
means they care about me. And they have a maintenance company that's very responsive. You know, when such and so's unit flooded and it went into my unit, they're on top of it right away. You know, like those are the things that you can do. So I'm definitely not saying that you shouldn't own 200 doors because it's irresponsible. You know, I don't think that it is, but with greater power becomes greater responsibility or whatever you want to say
Yeah.
with
No.
that. So I think those are there's always a scale to it and it becomes more expensive. And you have to hire more people to maintain it. But in the end, if everybody feels good where they live and they feel safe and they feel it's clean and that their needs that they're being listened to, then you're gonna get top rent anyway. You know what I
Right.
mean? And you're going to feel better about it and you're going to have less problems, you're going to have less lawsuits, you're going to have everything will be better. So
Yes.
it's just better to treat the property as if you lived there,
Uh,
you know?
yes, absolutely. And I'll toot my own horn here.
Mhm.
Right. So we had our condo, right?
Yeah.
And our old renter, let's call him Dwayne.
Okay.
He was fantastic. He would
Mhm.
call me and let me know if something was going on.
Yeah.
One day he says, Brett, we got a problem. This sink is not working.
Mm.
And I was like, all right, well, go and turn around and look at it. The sink was definitely not working, or the faucet wasn't. We had to replace the whole sink.
Mhm.
But we went in there and we did it the same day.
Yeah.
Because I was under the impression of like, I love Dwayne.
Yeah.
He's such a
I
great
want
renter.
Dwayne to keep loving me.
I want Dwayne
Yeah.
to keep loving me. I was ready to pay for 2 or 3 days of a hotel if I
For
needed
sure.
to,
Yeah.
right? But we were able to get that sink done and installed, and
Yeah,
he even helped because that's just the kind of guy that he is.
that's great.
And this is the kind of relationship that you want to have
Hmm.
with your tenants. I truly believe that. Going to what you were saying, clean and safe.
Hmm.
Spending a little bit of extra money on stone countertops
Sure.
is going to save you money in the long run.
Yeah, yeah.
Not using cheap paint that's going to get scuffed,
Mhm.
especially if they have kids,
Right, right.
is going to save you money in the long run. It's going to
Absolutely.
look nicer. It's
Mhm.
going to be a more pleasant place to be. Good carpet.
Right,
Don't put cheap carpet in your rentals. It's going to get stained. It's going to get dirty. You're going to have to replace it over and over and over again.
right.
Get good stuff. Replace it way less often.
Absolutely. And this kind of adds to a third, and to me, maybe not equally important as safe and clean, but very close, is create a space that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Create a space that you are proud of, and a place that if you lived there, you would be happy to live there. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that, of course, is always going to cost extra money. But like all of these factors weigh in to this complex emotional paradigm that people have in their minds. Like they don't have contact with you every day, so effectively their reflection of you is the house that you own that they live in.
Mhm.
So does that house look terrible? I mean, is there broken windows and stuff that you said you were going to fix that you just never got to? Like, of course, some things, of course, there's a give and take, right? Some things are more
Right.
important than others, but like, what kind of person do you want to be seen as? And you can easily reflect that with the condition of your home and your attentiveness. Again, another thing too. There's a book that Ahmed, my business partner, he sent to me as just kind of like an inspiration for talking to this or talking on this point. And a big part of it again is just kind of creating this beautiful space and living close to it. And the closer that you live to that property, like for me, for example, both of my main rentals right now are in North Minneapolis. One is right next door. It's a
Mhm.
lot easier for me to just go next door than it would be if I had this rental property in Texas. Like, how can
Sure.
I count on someone that I maybe have never met, right? I found a good opportunity in Texas. I bought this duplex down there, hired a property management company. I'm totally hands off. God knows what the actual condition of that place is. And if something goes down there, I mean, what are you going to do? It's going to be at best case, you
Mhm.
if you have to be there physically, you're there in a week. I don't. Maybe that's probably not even
Sure.
realistic for most people. So owning properties that are in your area, this kind of like buy the block mentality, um, is probably the best strategy that you can have, because when my tenants have issues, it's like, even if they're small issues, like I'm able to respond very quickly.
Right.
Let's not let these things get kicked down the road, because the longer you wait to replace that appliance or whatever it is, the longer
Mhm.
you wait to replace that broken air conditioner, the more animosity builds up in those tenants, for sure. You know what I mean? They're just thinking worse and worse of you every day. So
Absolutely.
put
And
yourself in a position to control that.
and I think too, along with that, some people might not have that luxury,
Hmm. Of,
right?
of course, absolutely.
Where they are like, well, we live over here and we really want to invest in this area
Hmm.
because we love this area. Grant Cardone, love him or hate him,
Sure.
love the story that he told, and it was about the super that he hired. He said,
Hmm.
"Look, if I'm paying you this amount of money,
Hmm.
you're robbing me."
Hmm.
And he said, "What we're gonna do is you're gonna take care of this, and when I sell in 3 to 4 years, you're gonna get an equity stake in that."
Yeah, that's great.
And now it's like, okay, now I'm not just collecting a paycheck.
Mhm.
Now I have a stake in this. Now I have some ownership. Getting your people in there to do that, now they care just as much as you do to make sure those tenants are being taken care of.
Absolutely. This is the huge concept and the foundation behind, this development that Ahmed and I are working on in North Minneapolis. He came up with the name, aptly named Equity Matters. And the focus of
Mhm.
this space, it'll be kind of a mixed use commercial space that provides kind of a meeting ground for people to come and have access to a lot of these industry resources, whether they be financial or credit repair contractors, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We have a place where people can kind of take the first steps into learning about home ownership, which on our last episode we talked about the biggest barrier seems to be a lack of information or lack of
Yeah.
understanding that the general public has, which is what's preventing them from owning real estate.
Yeah.
And then back to what you said, I mean, why does equity matter? Because you have a stake in it. Then
Mhm.
you have not only a stake in your personal house that you live in, but your neighborhood. You now have a stake.
Mhm.
You now have a reason to want your yard to be clean. You now have a
Mhm.
reason to want your neighbor's yard to be clean. So these things are so important, and the more homes or dwellings in an area that are owned by like hedge funds and asset management
Uh,
groups who are
yeah.
out of state, and they're literally just moving these portfolios, massive portfolios of property, which I have an article from Fox News that relates to this exact thing happening in North Minneapolis. How could they possibly, like, they not only are so detached because of their distance and the number of units that they have, they're detached because their only focus as an asset management group, their only focus as a hedge fund is to make money. So
Yes.
then you literally are just a dollar. I mean,
Yep.
to them, you are just a dollar. And these portfolios change hands over and over and over. I mean, I can look at this article that I brought. I just saw it. It caught my eye. Fox News talking about North Minneapolis Progress Residential, which manages more than 600 homes in the Twin Cities metro, but more than one third of the properties it manages, 220 homes, are in North Minneapolis. Progress Residential is owned by the $51 billion hedge fund Pretium Partners, the second largest owner of single family homes in the US. So, with that, in the past, let's see, they had a statistic on here about the housing violations that they had. Um, and they use the term in this article extracting value from the
Mhm.
neighborhood, which in a way I think they are. You know, when they
Sure.
kind of have like the massive portfolios that are not, these houses are never up for sale, so you can't buy your neighbor's house. You can't get equity in
Right.
your community. You can't have that pride of ownership in your home. So in that way, there's an extraction happening for sure. But they're talking about the amount of housing violations that happened. I think this is in the last, since this has changed hands, I want to say in the last 2 years. Fox 9 investigators revealed last year that the city recorded 1,592 housing code violations and received 273 complaints against the company. So now I believe Keith Ellison has taken some steps and set some. I haven't looked into what these are. I'm not
Sure.
going to get too deep into this, but set some parameters for them to continue operating within the city of Minneapolis here. But this just shows you, I mean, especially in an area that's already could be considered disenfranchised and lower income as far as the census tract is concerned. I mean, this is got to be a driving force behind the condition of an area, right?
Yeah.
Nobody owns their home. There's no pride of ownership. There's no equity in the neighborhood. So do you think people care about littering? Do you think they care about the upkeep of their homes? The landlords don't even care. They've been
Right.
calling into the management company about the broken front window and a door that doesn't lock for 6 months, and nobody's done anything about it. Clearly, the housing violations keep stacking up, and that is not any type of motivation for these asset management companies or the property management companies to make any type of action here or take any type of action.
Right. Well, and then you think about the legal ramifications of that too. And I mean, like you said, it is a disenfranchised area, and
Mhm.
not a lot of people have a lot of money to go hire a
Right.
lawyer, take these folks to court or anything like that.
Exactly. I mean, they don't even. I use this reference a lot, or I think about it a lot. I've started thinking about it a lot since I've lived in North Minneapolis. I've gotten very close with my neighbors, and I think this is true for most like lower income communities. Is that you can revert back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Hmm.
A lot of the people that I know that are kind of struggling in my neighborhood, they do not have basic needs met. They do not have, I mean, their concern is how can I get dinner on the table for my kids
Right.
tonight? So, if this is your concern, these basic safety and security, I think, is the category that Maslow used. If these safety and security parameters are not met, you don't really have any room whatsoever to start thinking about how to financially advance yourself in your life or what
No.
ways can you
Goodness
invest. You
no.
don't even have any money. You're not worried about the condition of your property, unless it's like directly impacting your health and safety, and sometimes not even then. You know
Right.
what I mean? Because you're just trying to get by. So without people having equity or being a stakeholder really in their neighborhood, we get locked in these cycles of, paycheck to paycheck, crime rises, broken families, drug use rises, like all of these terrible factors continue to rise. And it can all be drawn back to a lack of, equity in the community and a lack of resources as well. Like
Lack of education as well,
lack
like
of education.
what
Yeah,
we were
so
talking about.
resources, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like a lot of these people in my neighborhood, they don't know that there's this grant from Hawthorne neighborhood, out there right now to improve their home. They probably don't even own their home in a lot of
Right.
cases, so it's like not on the menu for them, and this is very sad, and I think that this is a fundamental thing that needs to change if we want to see society improve. I mean, overall, Americans in so many ways, I mean, we're sick, right? It's not feeling like too much of a community in a lot of places, or at least that's what the media certainly points out to us, as
Oh,
and that does not
you're
help the cause.
no, it does it doesn't.
Mhm.
The more and more that I look into how things used to be, nuclear families, nuclear family groups.
Mhm.
These are the things that we need to be talking to people about,
Sure.
discussing them. Like, what are the benefits of this?
Yeah. I think there's a huge movement right now that's against a lot of these like maybe conservative or like traditional values that have been implemented by humanity for thousands of years, that just kind of seem to work. You know, we're
Right.
trying to go against the grain, and I'm not saying that a lot of stuff needs to be reformed, but there are some,
No.
because I believe that there's a lot of problems that should be addressed. You know, especially with some of the more traditional concepts. You know, we've advanced as civilizations, so naturally we need to revisit some of these ideas. But with that being said, I mean, there's certain things that work and certain things like, you know, homeownership being one of them, you know, getting that first house. Why is that so important? We talked about it a lot on the last episode, and what happens when that opportunity is taken away from you, maybe by a similar hedge fund, or
Mhm.
asset management company like this. How does that impact the community? Well, clearly it, in this case, has prevented a lot. And there's
Right.
many other factors, right? But
Oh,
this is a significant one.
definitely. And this is the other thing too. We discussed this in the other episode, and waiting doesn't pay.
Yeah. Right.
You had alluded to there's not a lot of new builds going on,
Right.
especially something that's affordable for
Absolutely.
a family starting out.
Sure.
We have other pressures as well.
Yeah.
We have BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street.
Absolutely.
We have them buying up single family homes and then turning around and renting them, doing exactly what you're talking about right here.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, too, the United States, a lot of people didn't know, and I found it kind of crazy too when I found out about this. Did you know that we are the third most populated country in the world?
Hmm. I didn't.
We are still where people immigrate to.
Right.
So we have people immigrating here as well.
Mhm.
So and our population is just organically growing as
Right.
well. And these are all great things. I have absolutely nothing against any of these things except BlackRock, Vanguard, State
Sure.
Street. This is the land of dreams.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is that as these issues continue to compound,
Mhm.
it is going to get harder and harder
Absolutely.
for somebody to go out and get that thing that is going to lead towards their financial freedom.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, so I would say that this news article, this Fox news article that I just shared in North Minneapolis, I mean, this is they manage $51 billion in assets. This is small potatoes
Yeah.
compared to the big three that you just mentioned. And I think, you know, whatever you think of the guy, RFK made a pretty powerful projection based on these findings. And so this is small scale local stuff. But he was talking about, and I think you mentioned this before, right? These big three, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street,
Yep.
own 80% of the S&P 500.
Yep.
Their asset management is somewhere to the tune of $100 trillion.
Yes. State Street by themselves, right? And this goes back, I'm quoting Patrick Bet David on this.
Yeah.
There's only two countries that have a greater GDP than what they have under management.
One of them. Yes.
And China and the United States.
Crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah. And actually, you know, based on these notes that I took from that article, it sounds like more like 88% of the S&P 500. So this is just staggering. And now that it's clear that the goal has moved to acquiring residential real estate within the United States. In this video that I was watching in the quote, and you can easily verify these numbers. Of course, this is just a projection, but it certainly seems to be realistic. Is saying that these three companies are on track to own 60% of the residential real estate in America by 2030.
Yes.
So it's more important than ever to do this. You know, we're talking about bad market conditions and waiting until the time is right. Well, in the last episode we talked about a lot of things that you can take accountability and control of. But the reality is if a massive asset management group owns all of the real estate and they're not selling, you're not buying. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's more important than ever. And me personally, I'm not selling anything. You know, I'm going to hang on to
No,
as many
me
properties
either.
as I can. Uh, and I mean, we got to pay attention to this stuff. These are the same players right now that, you know, are behind these. I just saw this Wall Street Journal article the other day that got posted that was like something like say goodbye to dining rooms and living rooms. Like Americans are becoming more comfortable with like having much smaller houses with way less of these,
Right.
previously popular living spaces. It's like, you mean the living spaces where we have our families for holidays,
Hmm.
the places where we can host our friends to come over and talk with each other. We just want to eliminate that. It seems like these forces and like the World Economic Forum, we talked a little bit about that. Don't want to go too deep down
No,
that
don't
rabbit
want to go
hole,
too deep down that rabbit hole.
but it really seems to be the movement is like, let's build a ton of super big apartment buildings. Let's own all of the real estate,
Yep.
so you don't have a chance to, and you're going to get more and more comfortable with lower and lower standards of living because it's trendy, because it's like the right thing to do.
Oh,
So
I think it was Larry Fink that said, "You'll own nothing
and
and
you'll
be
be happy.
happy."
Yes, exactly.
What a scary thing to say.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, while I'm definitely of the mindset, we talked about this before too, it's like you don't want, there's a lot of doom if you look for it all around the world. I would say a small percent of that is stuff that can directly impact your lives and is something that you should pay attention to. I don't
Hmm.
think we're meant to be in touch with every global conflict that's happening,
No.
or more so our perception of what we think is happening, because who knows the real truth when some message is going through media companies that are owned by shareholders, traveling across the world, right? But this is something that is factual. This is something we can easily identify. And this is something also that a lot of people have witnessed firsthand. We've all heard a story about so and so, young first time home buyers. They go to make an offer on a house and they get outbid by some ambiguous LLC that's offering cash and 20% over list price. Like, we've all heard of this happening. I've sold listings to some of these companies, and they're shell companies that are, basically untraceable to the normal person, but they all
Right.
lead back up to these hedge funds and asset management groups that are, again, I'm not trying to be conspiratorial. I'm not even going to say their goal is to like enforce this new standard of living on humans, but they were trying to make more money and they found the right way to do it. And
Sure.
they have a lot of pressure to make more money. And they're not the ones that are having this conversation about how to ethically treat their tenants, right?
No.
That is not even on the
No.
docket. And when you have this massive portfolio and assets, hundreds of trillions of dollars, even the local agencies and government can't force you to do anything. You look at all these housing violations, it's like, well, the people who have all the money and all the assets are kind of the ones that are in control. So,
Right.
good luck putting the hammer down on them when they own the whole neighborhood.
Right. Well, and here, and I'm just going to even add on top of that because I think it's important when we're talking about these big companies. We
Hmm.
talked about three, the
Hmm.
big three.
Right.
They're all each other's biggest shareholders.
Of course. That's really one, right? What do
So,
you think about it?
really, when you take a look at it, it's a monopoly. And I'm not trying to say they're the Illuminati or anything
Yeah,
like
no.
that, but let's just take a moment, take a look at the facts.
Hmm.
And I think this really kind of goes back to, what we were talking about earlier is you got to take some personal responsibility because nobody's going to tell you,
Right.
"Oh, you need to go do this." No, you need to go figure this stuff out for yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And really, if you like, I'm a millennial,
Hmm.
right? For so many of us, it was like, I'm just kind of drifting.
Right.
I'm just kind of drifting. Well, guess what? Your time for drifting is done. Start figuring out a
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
Start preparing for things that happened to your great grandparents
Yeah, exactly.
because that shit is going to be coming down again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it really is just boots to the ground time, I think, for a lot of people, as far as getting your hands on even that one piece of property. It's so important right now. And again, we don't want to be doomsday people,
No,
but
we're not doomsday people, but we would
something's
be,
coming.
yeah, we would be remiss if we were saying, "Hey guys, yeah, so all this stuff is happening, but don't worry, you're going to be just fine."
Yeah.
You know what? You probably will be fine. You're
Yeah.
probably not going to die,
Hmm.
but your chances of getting to have a part of that American dream is going to become so much harder.
Oh yeah.
Just so much harder.
Yep, yep. No, I'm with you, man. Well, it's good. I mean, I think the more there are a lot of people that are speaking to these issues that are coming out. I mean, I've pulled a lot of information from people that I follow that start talking about these things, that have kind of started paying attention. Like, hey, something serious is happening here, and if we don't like really start taking action
Yeah.
and stop concerning ourselves with, again, like we talked about the last episode, the frivolous spending and the things that we can control.
Yeah.
I'm confident that, like, if you and maybe your partner have a reasonably paying job, that
Mhm.
you can take some steps to budget and change your lifestyle enough to At least get your DTI on track so that you
Mhm.
can purchase a home. It might not be the exact home, your dream home. It might not be in the exact neighborhood that you want it to be, but get your hands on something. Get the
Get your hands
process
on
started.
something.
Give yourself some options. All right. That's
Mhm.
like what I keep coming back to. Give yourself some options here. And you really have to make some very serious intentional steps right now, I think,
Yes.
to prepare yourself for these things. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
And this is the other thing too. Talk to people who are in the industry right now.
Right.
They're the ones that are, I mean,
They're buying.
they're buying.
They're buying. I'm buying. I mean, my
Yeah,
my realtor friends, they're buying right now.
they're
I mean,
buying.
they've always been buying.
Yeah,
Uh,
they don't
and
stop.
and there's a reason for that. It's exactly everything that we've talked about. Is the best time to buy was yesterday.
Yes.
So
So don't let what's going on in the media when it comes to interest rate, when it comes to everything else,
right,
scare you. I used to be a geologist.
yeah,
Our catchphrase was the past gives us a key to the future, to the
right,
present,
right, right.
right? We can do the same thing with housing data.
Hmm.
Real estate is still a really good investment.
Right.
We went over how it will help you build wealth.
Hmm.
So just know that.
And then one thing, if I can interject to speak on that point, something that I just wanted to talk about is regardless of the interest rates, the cost of housing, the economic factors, what I always tell, whether it's a first-time home buyer or an experienced investor, and experienced investors know this well because this is the way they've been operating for a long time. Run your numbers in multiple scenarios, right? How does this property perform based on my income as my primary residence, right? Can I afford this mortgage payment? Even if the housing market tanks and my house is worth half of what I paid for it, do I still love my house and am I still able to afford this payment? That's an important one to go by because then truly it's worth whatever you've paid for it to you. This is your home. This is like your temple. This is a very important thing. If you're an investor, can the rents, no matter what, I mean, do you have enough cash flow to cover the deferred maintenance on this property? um, Again, assuming that everything goes bad in the market value aspect of the real estate market, rents should typically go up or at least stay the same in those markets, right? But just
And
make
we have seen that statistically.
right. And are you buying a house that is like a very multi-million dollar property that you're using as a rental that is a very niche rent, or
Hmm.
maybe that's a less advisable decision here. But anyway, my point being is that you can run the numbers in any interest rate, in any housing market, in any of these situations, and you can determine what is viable and what is not. And the numbers are numbers, right? The numbers are totally objective, right? There's no emotion in the numbers. It either makes sense or it doesn't. And you can maybe change your standards a little bit as far as what makes sense for your personal situation, but either makes sense or it doesn't. And so as long as you have gone through these little drills or whatever you want to call it and ran these scenarios to make sure that it is viable and when in multiple different atmospheres, right, or environments, political, economic environments, financial environments, whatever you want to call it, as long as it's viable there and you've done your checking, it doesn't really matter what the cost is, right? Because you've made sure that it is not necessarily even profitable, but at least not going to be a bad investment for you or something that is going to end up, in a default.
Sure.
Right.
Nope. I think that's very well said, Zach.
Cool. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. We are getting yelled at by our camera guy
Going long again.
because
All
we're
right.
going long again.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure being here. Hopefully, some of this information reaches people, and I hope to hear more people, pointing at some of these topics.
Yes.
It's really important.
And if you want to
Please,
discuss this,
yeah,
if you have questions, if this discussion that we just had brought up a question, you're like, well, you didn't really cover that. Well, go ahead, leave us a comment.
yeah.
We'd
We'll
love to
talk
talk
about
with
it
you
next
about it.
time.
Yeah,
We are
absolutely.
the smartest people in the room, so just kidding.
No, well, again, thank you so much for being here,
Yeah,
Zach.
man. Thank you.
Guys, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you stayed here to the end, that's huge. We appreciate that. And until next time, happy house hunting. We'll see you then.
See you later.